Welcome back everyone to my channel. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that I know is very relatable and perhaps a significant challenge for a considerable portion of our viewers. Especially young and middle-aged people here in the US. That is how to build a healthy, scientific diet and exercise regimen for those who regularly work the night shift. You see, working the night shift isn't just about changing your work hours. It's about going against our body's natural circadian rhythm, which has been programmed for thousands of years to be active during the day and rest at night. This disruption can cause countless health problems, from short-term to long-term, and that's why adjusting diet and exercise becomes more important than ever for night shift workers. Why do I say this topic is especially important for both young and middle-aged night shift workers? Scientific studies have shown a clear link between shift work, especially night shifts, and many health problems. For example, night shift workers are often at higher risk of digestive issues, sleep disorders, of course, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and even some types of cancer. In addition, lack of sleep and a disrupted circadian rhythm also affect cognitive function, meaning memory, concentration, and decision-making ability. For young people working the night shift, you might initially think you're young and healthy. You can handle it. But not building healthy habits early on can lead to health problems accumulating over time. For example, a young person working as a night security guard. At night they often eat fast food and drink a lot of energy drinks to stay awake. And during the day they go home but don't get enough sleep. Gradually, they feel chronic fatigue, difficulty concentrating on anything other than work, and start gaining weight uncontrollably. This doesn't just affect health but also social life and mental well-being. What about middle-aged people working the night shift? They may have already started experiencing underlying health issues. Working the night shift can exacerbate these problems and increase the risk of chronic diseases. For example, a middle-aged nurse working the night shift in a hospital. High work pressure, coupled with irregular eating and lack of sleep, often causes her to have stomach problems and unstable blood pressure. This directly affects her health and her ability to care for patients. 2. An older person has a great saying, "Health is gold." This is even more true for those who do jobs that require alertness and physical stamina like working the night shift. So, how can we adjust our bodies and lifestyles to work the night shift and still maintain the best possible health? The key lies in building a scientific diet and a suitable exercise schedule, while also focusing on sleep hygiene. Now I'll focus on the diet part first. For night shift workers, eating is not just about getting energy but also about supporting the disrupted circadian rhythm. Regarding meal timing, this is an extremely important factor. Instead of eating 3 main meals at traditional times, you need to adjust it to fit your work schedule. Before the shift, eat a balanced, nutritious meal about 1 to 2 hours before starting your night shift. This meal should include protein, lean meat, fish, eggs, beans, complex carbohydrates, whole grains, sweet potatoes, brown rice, and green vegetables. This meal helps you have enough energy to start your shift without feeling heavy. During the shift, avoid eating overly heavy meals or greasy food in the middle of the night shift. Our digestive system works less efficiently at night. Instead, prepare light, easily digestible meals and divide them into several small meals throughout your shift. After the shift, when you finish your night shift and are preparing to sleep, avoid eating large meals. Eating too much before bed can cause indigestion and affect sleep quality. If you're hungry, eat a light, easily digestible meal about 1 to 2 hours before going to bed. Regarding what to eat during the shift, and throughout the day. This is where we focus on superfoods that are easy to find, easy to prepare, and good for both energy and brain function. Fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, are rich in omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3s are extremely good for the brain, helping to improve memory, concentration, and reduce the risk of cognitive decline. The mechanism of omega-3s is that they help build and maintain healthy brain cell membranes. How to incorporate. You can prepare grilled or pan-seared salmon beforehand. Pack it in a container to take to work. Eat it with salad or steamed vegetables for a healthy meal during your shift. Or simpler, eating canned sardines with whole grain crackers is also very convenient. Advice, warnings. Fatty fish in general is good. But if you have a history of seafood allergies, of course, don't consume it. If you are taking blood thinners, consult your doctor about the amount of omega-3 supplements you should take. Idiom. Look before you leap, though perhaps, see the big picture, or, keep your wits about you. Fit better for brain health. Eating fatty fish helps keep your mind clear to see the big picture at work. Adapting the idiom slightly for relevance. Nuts and seeds, walnuts, almonds, chia seeds, flax seeds, are also excellent sources of omega-3s, vitamin E and antioxidants. They help protect brain cells from damage and support cognitive function. The fiber and protein in nuts also help maintain stable energy levels. How to incorporate. Carry a small bag of nuts for snacks during your shift. Sprinkle chia seeds or flax seeds into yogurt, smoothies, or oatmeal. Eating walnuts as a late-night snack is very good. Advice, warnings. Nuts can cause allergies in some people. They are also calorie-dense. So eat them in moderation. If you have digestive issues, eating too many nuts can cause discomfort. Older folks say, measure your cloth by the yard. A saying about being careful with resources when eating nuts. Be mindful of the quantity. Don't eat too much at once. Adapting a saying about being careful with resources to mean being careful with portion sizes. Berries, blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, are rich in powerful antioxidants. They help protect the brain from oxidative stress and may improve memory and learning ability. How to incorporate. Add berries to yogurt, oatmeal, smoothies, or eat them directly as a light dessert during your shift. Very convenient and refreshing. Advice, warnings. Most people can eat berries. If you have blood sugar issues, control the amount you eat as berries still contain natural sugar. Dark leafy greens, spinach, kale, broccoli, are excellent sources of vitamin K, lutein, folate, and beta-carotene. These nutrients have been shown to slow down age-related cognitive decline. How to incorporate. Make a small salad to take to work. Add spinach to scrambled eggs or smoothies. Make a light vegetable soup. Advice, warnings. If you are taking blood thinners, consult your doctor about eating a lot of leafy greens due to their high vitamin K content. Eggs are an excellent source of choline, an important nutrient for brain health, especially memory. Eggs are also rich in protein, which helps you feel full longer. How to incorporate. Boil a few eggs beforehand to take to work. Eat boiled eggs with a little salt and pepper for a nutritious snack. Make egg salad or whole grain egg sandwiches. Advice, warnings. People with high cholesterol should consult their doctor about the amount of eggs they should eat. Avocado contains healthy monounsaturated fats, good for brain health. Avocado also contains vitamin K and folate, which help improve memory and concentration. How to incorporate. Eat avocado slices with whole grain bread. Add avocado to salads or make an avocado smoothie. Very easy to prepare. Advice, warnings. Avocado is calorie dense, so eat it in moderation if you are watching your weight. Whole grains, oatmeal, brown rice, whole wheat bread provide stable energy for the brain by slowly releasing glucose into the bloodstream. Fiber also helps the digestive system work better. How to incorporate. Prepare overnight oats with yogurt, berries, and nuts to take to work. Eat brown rice with lean meat and vegetables. Make sandwiches with whole wheat bread. Advice, warnings. People with celiac disease, gluten intolerance, need to choose gluten-free whole grains like brown rice or gluten-free oatmeal. Regarding what to avoid, minimize sugary snacks, fried foods, and processed foods during your night shift. They only provide temporary energy and will make you more tired later. Avoid drinking too much coffee or energy drinks, especially towards the end of your shift, as they can seriously affect your daytime sleep. Prioritize water. It's the best. Now for the exercise part. Exercising for night shift workers also requires a strategy. Timing of exercise. The best time to exercise for night shift workers might be before starting the shift. Exercising at this time can help you feel alert and full of energy for the upcoming night shift. If you can't exercise before the shift, you can try to exercise immediately after finishing your shift. But make sure you don't exercise too intensely or too close to bedtime. High-intensity exercise can make it difficult to fall asleep. If your schedule doesn't allow it, take advantage of your days off to catch up on exercise. Types of exercise. Combine cardio exercises, running, cycling, jumping rope, to boost cardiovascular health and alertness. Strength training exercises, lifting weights, push-ups, squats, to boost metabolism and improve mood, along with flexibility exercises, yoga, stretching, to reduce stress. Fitting it into a busy schedule. You don't need to spend hours at the gym. Take advantage of break times during your shift to take a brisk walk or climb stairs. If you live near work, consider walking or cycling to work. Find short workouts that you can do at home without much equipment. Consistency and regularity are key. Even just 15 to 20 minutes a day can make a big difference. It's like older people often say, many a little makes a mickle. Every little bit counts. Keep exercising consistently a little bit each day and your health will improve. Specific examples. A young IT professional working the night shift can spend 20 minutes before their shift jogging around the neighborhood. During breaks at work, they can take a brisk walk around the office or do a few simple squats or push-ups. On days off, they can spend time hiking or take a yoga class. A middle-aged manager working the night shift can do light cardio exercises on a treadmill at home before their shift. And spend time doing strength training exercises with light weights or resistance bands on their days off. Sleep hygiene. For night shift workers, daytime sleep is as important as nighttime sleep is for daytime workers. Create an ideal sleep environment. Your bedroom should be dark, quiet, and cool. Use blackout curtains, earplugs, and an eye mask to block out light and noise. Try to maintain a regular sleep schedule. Try to go to bed and wake up at the same time every day. Even on your days off. This helps your body form a new sleep schedule. Avoid sunlight on the way home. Wear sunglasses when driving home in the morning to minimize the impact of sunlight on your body clock. Avoid stimulants before bed. Don't drink coffee, tea, energy drinks, or alcohol a few hours before going to sleep. Limit screen time before bed. The blue light from phones and computers can reduce the production of melatonin, the hormone that makes us feel sleepy. Combining a healthy diet, regular exercise, and good sleep hygiene will significantly help night shift workers reduce the negative impacts of their job on their health. When your body is supplied with enough energy from healthy foods, exercised to stay flexible, and gets enough quality rest, you'll feel more alert during your shift, more focused at work, have enough energy for family and friends after work, and importantly, reduce the risk of chronic diseases in the long run. It's like older people often say, health is gold. Taking care of yourself is the best investment. I know that implementing all of this can be a challenge, especially when work schedules change constantly. But start with the smallest changes and gradually integrate them into your daily life. Don't try to change everything at once, as that can discourage you. Be patient with yourself and celebrate the small progress you make. And I also want to reiterate this. Although I've provided information on foods good for memory and concentration, along with a few tips, I am not a licensed nutritionist or medical professional. The advice here is for general reference only. Especially if you have any underlying health conditions, such as diabetes, heart disease, digestive issues, or are taking medication, always consult your doctor or a registered dietitian before making any significant changes to your diet or exercise routine. They can provide personalized advice that best suits your specific health condition. Never blindly apply health advice on your own. I hope the sharing just now has given night shift workers more knowledge and motivation to take care of their health. You know, night shift work has its own difficulties. But your health is still the most important thing. You know, now it's time for me to really hear from you. You know, if you are a night shift worker, what challenges have you faced in maintaining a healthy diet and exercise routine? Do you have any hard-earned tips or experiences you want to share with the community? Or do you have any favorite healthy night shift snacks or meals that are easy to prepare and take to work? Please leave your comments below this video. You know, let's learn from each other and support each other to have the best possible health. You know, or if you have any questions about this topic, don't hesitate to ask. You know, thank you all very much for taking the time to watch this video. You know, I know this topic is quite in-depth and might be a bit long, but I hope it has provided truly valuable information for those working the night shift and their loved ones too. You know, if you found this content useful and want to see more videos from me on topics related to health, lifestyle, self-development, and how to cope with challenges in modern life, don't forget to hit the like button. Share this video with your friends and family, especially those who work the night shift that you know. You know, and most importantly, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell icon right away so you don't miss any new content in the future. You know, your support is the biggest motivation to help the channel grow and bring more valuable content. You know, see you all in the next videos. You know, wishing all night shift workers abundant health and full of energy. You know.